Welcome to Community Chats, bringing you stories and insights from the heart of Community Living Toronto, a non-profit organization that proudly supports people with intellectual disabilities and their families. We will focus on stories of belonging and inclusion and topics of interest from communities across Ontario and the world. From uplifting moments to breaking barriers, from innovative policies to ideas from leading thinkers, we continue to advocate for inclusive communities and support the rights and choices of people with an intellectual disability.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Saunders. I'm the CEO at Community Living Toronto. Welcome to our Community Chats podcast. This is an opportunity where we share and learn and understand from each other. These podcasts are released on the 15th and the 30th of every month, so please listen, like, and give us your feedback. These are one of the ways we like to stay connected, and we value your feedback. We have a really great episode for you today, and one of the reasons I think so is that an advantage of the work that we do, and that I really enjoy, are the relationships that are developed with people over many years. Developmental services supports people throughout their lives, which means that you often share many experiences with people over many years, and in some cases, over generations. Today's conversation is a great story of exactly that. Mark Ayles grew up in Scarborough in a supportive and caring family. He became involved with community living through his brother Paul and parents, who are part of our community for many years. In our conversation today, Mark shares some stories about his family, their supportive neighborhood in Scarborough, and some really great memories of his brother Paul, who sadly passed away. Mark and his family have a compelling story that I'm sure many of you will relate to, and I'm glad that he was so open with us today. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
Here again with another of our conversations with people that are connected with Community Living Toronto. And I'm really pleased this afternoon to have a conversation with Mark Ayles, who's been a friend of and supporter of Community Living Toronto for many years, from a connection with his brother and his parents' connection with Community Living Toronto. So, Mark, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah. You were one of the people that we tapped on to share their stories with us through our 75th anniversary. And you shared a great story about your family and your brother. And I'm wondering if you could refresh our memory around and tell us a little bit about your parents and your brother.
All right. So family of five, we grew up in Scarborough, Warden 401. There was three boys, myself, Peter, the middle brother, and Paul, my oldest brother. Paul, of course, is the one we're talking about today. We grew up in a great little neighborhood. Everyone watched out for my big brother, made sure, he wasn't doing anything he shouldn't have been doing, but he was always on his bicycle, always moving around. And so it was really great for my parents to know that the whole community was always, keeping an eye on Paul and making sure everything was going well. Paul, he went to Lawson in the early years, and I can still remember going in there for some of the events and whatever. So he had, I would say back then he had a better than normal lifestyle with what he had, because he was included at Lawson, and they had some really great programs over there. Paul was always well liked, so we always had his teachers over for Sunday dinners. He would go with them to private events. Later in life at at the workshop on Fairfax, he would go to weddings with some of the ladies down there as a chaperone. Okay. So yeah, Paul was always well liked. He always had a smile on, and he never had an enemy. So it was great.
That's great. He'd go to the weddings as like a +1 kind of thing. Is that?
Yeah. And then they always went to McDonald's afterwards. That was the big kicker.
Now you talk about growing up in Scarborough and your community, your neighborhood being a really important part to what made your family life and Paul's life growing up quite a bit more reassuring. I think the nickname your neighbors had was Uncle Paulie. community is very important to Community Living Toronto, and in our strategic plan, we're looking at how do we help foster communities and neighborhoods across the city, because it is one of the strengths of Toronto. What made your neighborhood that, as you look back on that special place, or that place that felt like home, and where Paul was really welcomed along with the rest of your family?
It might have been the time that we all grew up back then. We were all friends. We all knew each other. You know, we had a lot of us went to the same church in the neighborhood. But you know, when you went to school, you had 30 people in your class, but you all grew up in the same neighborhood, not like
Right.
today, bussed in from all over. And you know, my brother's friends were protectors of Paul, um, and everyone would, and you were always outside when we were younger. No one was
Yeah.
inside. We were not allowed to be inside. So, you know, he was always included in a lot of the games we played, you know, hide and go seek and whatnot. Our neighbors had pools. He was always allowed to go swimming there. So it was just like it was a little mini community. Our little neighborhood was a little mini community, from Wishing Well to Warden, 401 to Shepherd, that he never ventured out of, but everyone took care of him, but they also took care of all of us, you know, at the same time.
Right. Right.
I
That's
Sorry, I was just going to say before I forgot, my
yeah.
son started working at Seneca College for a summer job, and he met a guy there that his grandparents grew up on our corner of our. We lived on a circle, and
Okay.
he made a comment to Peter that he really respected how our parents took care of my brother, and that came from a mid 40-year-old person that, you know, wasn't on the inside because he really didn't grow up when we were growing up, but he noticed that Paul was well liked and well taken care of, and it made me feel really good inside that my parents, they went over and above to make sure Paul was always included in everything.
Yeah, that's remarkable, because this would have been decades ago that your
Absolutely.
family had lived there, and you made Paul and your family made that impression that lasted, you know, a generation or two down from when you lived there.
Yeah, my parents moved into that house when Paul was 2. So he was born in 59, I think. He was born in 59.
Okay.
So that was a long time ago. And mom lived there until we had to move her in a retirement home. So she was there
Yeah,
for almost 50, 60 years, I guess. So that's
that's
great.
great. One of the things that you mentioned was how the neighborhood was a safe place, and that in your story you talk about it giving you a huge peace of mind. One of the things that, you know, many parents and people that are involved with supporting people with disabilities worry about is that the community that we sometimes experience is not often the community that they experience, where they can be more vulnerable and more victimized, and taken advantage of. So to have that growing up, that must have been a real kind of blessing and reassurance for your parents, for sure.
Well, what was really nice is when Paul started to go to Fairfax to community living, to the workshop, he would take the bus down Warden Avenue. And if the bus saw Paul was running down the street, because we lived maybe 200 meters from the bus stop, but down a little street, if he saw Paul running, he would wait with the door open. And my mom would always stand on the front porch and make sure he got on the bus okay. But the bus driver would wait for him, and so, you know, Paul was well liked, so everyone, I'm sure he caught the same bus almost every day, so the guy would get to.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
was
Now
nice.
yeah, now you talk about, just to continue on about Paul and his personality. You talked about him as, I think you used the term, he's such a character that he was well liked in that. What memories stand out for you?
I always I always talk about him. Well, he was he was just a great guy. But when we would go to weddings, he would walk up to, you know, any of the pretty ladies that were there, take their hand and go dancing. And that was it. That's all he had to do. And he was dancing. Um, he loved riding his bike all the time. He would go down to the coffee shop and get a black coffee. And it's funny, I was always amazed that he never seemed to get taken advantage of, when he went down to the little store to buy, pop or go to it was a donut shop at the time, Tim Hortons, I don't think we're around. And he always came back with the right change. So no one ever took advantage of him like could have been easily done. I always was amazed at that. That was just nice human spirit.
That's fantastic. You talk about your parents, and they moved into the house young, and your parents were very involved with Community Living Toronto and also our Lawson program. And
Yes.
Paul participated in a number of programs there, and you mentioned he eventually went to one of our day support programs at Fairfax. Your parents, so respite or short break or parent relief, there's a number of terms for it. That was an important part of your parent supports for Paul and your family. Did you have conversations with them about how they felt about respite and why they used it and how it was of benefit to them?
It's funny because we grew up in a busy house. My mom never worked as a job. She sure worked around
Yeah.
the house. So she was always involved in the community with the church. And I remember there was a person in our neighborhood with a severe disability, and she would go there and manipulate his legs with the ladies. And she had a rug hooking group and everything. So I remember my mom was always busy. My dad was always busy at work. And so Paul would play with us if they were out, whatever. Or Paul, he was pretty self-sufficient too. He
Right.
could take care of himself quite well. One great thing we had was we would spend the whole summer up at a YMCA camp called Geneva Park. And it was just another avenue. When we were there, Mom never had to worry about Paul. He could swim like a fish. And so he wasn't ever going to drown. He was on his bike, but there was, I don't know, 500 or 600 people at this camp. We all had our own little cottages, and everyone there would always be looking out for Paul too. So during the day, all summer long, my mom would have a super break because she could just, do summer activities and whatnot. And Paul would be Paul would sit in the ski boat all day and tell people when the skiers fell. That was his job with all the people
The
down there.
spotter.
The spotter, exactly. And they loved him down there, and he would go to the tuck shop. But that was another place that my parents never had to worry about him because the whole camp was keeping their eyes open for him. So it was wonderful. And it was
That was the thing. That ability to not have to worry, to feel like he's enjoying himself and in a safe space.
and we were very fortunate with my grandparents. My mom's side, Paul used to go there for weekends, so that would give my mom and dad a break. I talked to a friend of mine. They've had a child with the same disability as Paul, and they said something really unique the other day because they have 3 kids. They have Hudson, who's loved to death at school, and then the 2 girls. And they said to me the other day, Jeff and his wife were talking, and they said, "We get to have Hudson forever." And I'm like, wow, like we're trying to get rid of our kids all the time, and they were just so happy that they're gonna have Hudson forever. And I'm like, wow, that's such a great way to look at that you're gonna have this great person around.
Yeah. Now, I wonder if you have any thoughts. I know Paul passed away a while ago, and you've been without him for a bit of time, and I want to ask you about that. But in terms of what the system or the services that are available now versus what was available when Paul was growing up, and you were a bit younger then, obviously, so you might not have the best recollection or have been involved at the time. But any contrast between then and now? What are your reflections on that?
Yeah, this is a sore spot with me. Years ago, when the Liberal government changed the minimum wage, and a lot of the group homes changed, not group homes, sorry, the workshops changed,
Workshops, yeah.
that they couldn't run as effectively as they did. To me, that was so frustrating. I remember listening to the minister at the time saying, well, a lot of these people will find jobs elsewhere. And they had jobs. They had great jobs. And some of my fondest moments of my brother was going to those going down to Fairfax for their events, and the pride they all had in their job. And to us, it probably wasn't a very meaningful job, but it sure was to them.
Yeah.
They worked extremely hard at whatever they did. They were good at it, and they had their parties down there, and a lot of that has changed and never to go back, unfortunately. And um, it just gave my brother, it gave him something to do and look forward to, and meaningful in his life. Like he
Yeah. So that sort of sense of hanging out with friends and belonging somewhere was not something that was made up elsewhere
no,
in his life
no,
once he wasn't able to do that anymore. I mean, the issue around the closure of that, as you know, had a lot to do with paying minimum wage and making sure people weren't sort of taken advantage of economically. But to your point, there was something that was lost in
to
that for
me,
some.
that's when the government has to step up and say, listen, not all Ontarians are equal, not equals, maybe the wrong word.
Right.
Maybe there's different situations that we do things differently.
Right.
My brother lived in a nice home. He didn't need minimum wage to survive. He was fine.
Right.
He got his minimal paycheck every 2 weeks. He was so proud. He would always give it to my mom for room and board. It was crazy, like $3 or whatever, and she would take it. Um, but it gave him pride. And
That
so
sense of purpose.
after that changed, he ended up spending more time with my dad, and they would go, to restaurants and bars and shopping and whatnot, and fill his time that way. But I don't think Paul, he really enjoyed going to work. And a funny note, I had a celebration of life for him recently, and two of the people from community living at Fairfax, George, and I forget the other guy's name, they came to my brother's event, and it
Oh,
made me
nice.
feel nice inside. So um,
Nice. Excellent.
they were all a big, you know, bunch of buddies down there. It was great.
Yeah. No, it must be a big loss that because your parents are no longer with us and you've lost your brother. How does that all sort of sit with you? I guess you've been processing a
Yeah.
lot over the
The
last little bit.
the toughest time is holidays, of course, but also Paul loved our cottage, so he loved to swim. When he was younger, he would always go in the tube behind the boat, but he was just always there, and
Yeah.
he was just like having a beer, sitting on the dock, with my mom, and enjoying himself that way. So those are tough. I kind of get a little sad when I think those days.
Yeah.
And yeah, we tried to include him as much as we could. We all have busy lifestyles. But he
Yeah.
also, Paul liked his private time as well. So
Yeah.
if he was watching a good TV show, he didn't want you to bother him. It was
Right.
he'd come home, get a beer, go up to his room, watch a show, wait for dinner. That was his thing. So yeah, it was fun.
Excellent. Excellent. Nice routine.
Yeah.
Um, now, Mark, you've been quite generous with us and our Shadow Lake program over the years, and that was a place that Paul loved going to. Can you talk a little bit about what Shadow Lake meant to him, and then again, why you chose to support us out, to help us out over the years quite faithfully?
So Shadow Lake to me is one of my favorites that I like to contribute to, because we're cottagers and Shadow Lake is like a cottage, and and the lead up to COVID, you didn't really think about it, but when COVID hit, you really saw the need for camps like this, because a lot of these people in group homes, they don't get out of those group homes at all. They have So if they get a few days or a week at Shadow Lake, like that could make their year. Um,
Right.
so, over the years, we've been more than happy to help out with different items that were needed, or funding for this and that. But when Paul got to go there, he didn't go there like year after year after year like he did to their cottage. But when he went there, he was with his friends. And
Right.
and as you know, we all have different circles of friends, and he had his friends, and he would be at the camp, and he loved water. So if he could be in the water all day or just playing games, like he liked to be goofy. So that was a great spot for him. And for me and our family with the camp, especially swimming, one thing I noticed over the years is everyone is equal in the water. It doesn't matter. Like you're all going to float. So, and the water is a great calming place, and it's nice and warm. And then you get out, you got the sand under your feet. So, yeah, Shadow Lake for us is definitely special, and I hope it lasts forever. And telling Sylvie recently, so some of the money that was left over from Paul, we've put into a fund. So every year moving forward,
Oh,
we're going to be able to send a couple people to camp in his honor, which makes me happy inside. So, these people,
that's great.
everyone needs a little fun in their life. Yeah. I remember a couple years ago when I guess it was 3 years ago when that storm went through and did all that damage,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they were going to struggle getting the camp open in time, or some of the programs. And I just reached out to a few of my friends, and then before we knew it, there was 25 people there clearing trees in an afternoon, and it was done. And
Yeah,
it was really special as they got to meet
that
some
was great.
campers that were up there,
That
and
was great.
they're just fun. The one guy, he just wanted to tell me he liked Coca-Cola. I like Coca-Cola. Yeah, we all. So
That's true.
you reach out to your friends, and they step up to the plate, and
Yeah,
out the people at Shadow Lake, which was great for us.
yeah.
So
And I don't think it was just a storm. I think it was a tornado that went through, right, and
yeah, it
ripped
was,
up a bunch of trees and knocked some stuff. That was quite the event.
oh, it was terrible, that storm that went through. Yeah.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, we had held our Leaders in Philanthropy event, and I know you attended, and you've been a recipient in the past as well. And Rocco Rossi spoke to us as a group and talked to us for 10 or 15 minutes. Great speaker, really engaging, and had a great message. You mentioned that some of the things that he mentioned that night really resonated with you.
Yeah.
And you got a couple minutes to chat with him. What stood out for you?
I know we mentioned this before. He had a little comment about the nonprofits, how we're not nonprofits, we're bigger and more important than that. But just his story and how he worded everything, and then I started telling him a little bit about my brother, and I started to tear up, and he just put his hand on my shoulder. He says,
Um,
you're allowed to do that, which was great. He was a wonderful speaker, and he, his own track across, I forget what part of the world it was, but
Spain.
yeah, he just brought some
Yeah.
really cool stories. And for me, I gotta say that event, I love going to that event, because
Oh,
one thing
good.
that community living does really well is you bring the people that we're supporting to the events, and they're included 100%. And we give out the awards, and I think the people that get the awards, like the banks and stuff, they come and they can see firsthand the good that we're doing for the people, because they're there and you can talk to them, and it's really nice. And
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. The one of our um, priorities is to make sure that so often in our province and in our interactions, people with disabilities are often hidden, not in sight, not in positions of importance at times. And many organizations, ourselves included, are trying to change that and make sure that people with lived experience that have had their own journeys are important to many people and in their communities, that they're front and center in we do. And that's great to hear you say that you recognize that. Thank you.
this was the first year I've ever gone to Toronto. Was it Toronto Rocks? Is that it? Community
Community
Rocks.
rocks. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, I was blown away at that event. Because once
That's a
again,
fun party, eh?
the people we're trying to help are there, and they love
Yeah,
to party. And it was so much fun. The music was great. Everyone was having a super time, and we can raise some money and have a good time. But
yeah,
it's so great that, like you say, you bring the people along that we're trying to help, and
yeah.
showcase that. So
Well, we're already planning for next year or we do that every 2 years. So we're already planning for the next one, and we're setting a pretty ambitious pretty ambitious goal. So we'll man, you're like a PSA for us, a commercial. I didn't know this is where this conversation was going, but thank you.
Yeah, there's a few things that I community living has got a close spot to my heart, and Big Brothers, so I try and help out them as much as I
Great,
can. I've been involved with them
great.
for a long time. I was gonna say you made it something twerk in me. Years ago, my brother had a little episode when he was in the van. They had this little row crew at Fairfax, and he was on the
Yeah,
van cutting grass or whatever. And they had a little kid in the episode, so they sent him in to Stouffville Hospital. And I always thought my brother had a smaller life than I did, because I'm out on the road and doing everything. And when I was sitting there waiting for the doctor to say what was the matter with him, two York Regional police officers came in, and they went to the nurses station. They said, we understand, you've got a person in here with disabilities, and we, who is it? And so, well, he's in the room over there, and these two cops walked in the room, and my brother knew them both from the coffee shop. And it just blew me away. I'm like, how do you know these people? Oh, we have coffee with Paul every day, in the group in the coffee shop. And I'm like, it opened my mind to say, oh yeah, it's just not a little world he's living in either. He's got friends outside of whatever we knew. And to me, that was an eye opener for me, that my brother Paul, he had a lot more going for him than I gave him credit for. So this is good.
That's a great story. Nice. I think we'll end on that. What a nice story and memory that you've got of Paul. So, Mark, thanks for taking the time, and thanks for your support. And we will definitely stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks very much. Community living, you guys are doing a fantastic job. I see you out there all the time, and let's get more people supporting your great programs. And
Thank you.
Thanks for having me here today. Makes me happy.
Great.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you very much, Mark. Have a good afternoon.
Mark's family story is one many of us can relate to. It was moving to hear about his fond memories of his older brother Paul and the community that they grew up in Scarborough. Paul's life, surrounded by family and friends in a supportive environment, is something we should all aspire to. I am honored that Mark is part of our community. Thanks for joining our Community Chats podcasts. New episodes are, as always, released on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so don't forget to subscribe and stay up to date. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.
Don't forget to join us next time as we unpack the power of community through collaborative initiatives and shared experiences. Available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Audible, and YouTube. Follow us on social media at CL Toronto. Let's chat, share, and spread those good vibes together. We hope these discussions will inspire you and give new ideas to add your voice to our mission of making our communities and neighborhoods inclusive and welcoming.